Hi to everyone and welcome to this AMETEK Spectroscientific webinar. Okay, right now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. With us today from AMETEK Spectroscientific is Lisa Williams. Lisa is a maintenance and reliability professional with over 10 years of experience working in tribology and reliability engineering. Specializing in lubricant analysis, Lisa currently serves on the technical solutions sales team at Spectroscientific. She is certified by the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers as a certified lubrication specialist and also holds Machinery Lubrication Technician 1 and Laboratory Lubricant Analyst 2 certifications with the International Council of Machinery Lubrication. Lisa currently serves as co-vice chair on the American Standards of Testing and Materials DO2.96 Committee for in-service lubricant testing and practices, and was the technical lead on 2 ASTM standards for in-service grease sampling and analysis. Lisa holds a BS in chemistry from York College of Pennsylvania and an MBA from Elizabethtown College. Now also with us today is Nate Hivner. Nate serves as a maintenance technician in the PDM group with an East Coast specialty alloys manufacturer. Coming from the automotive repair industry, Nate started with CarTech in 2012 and spent 4 years as a lubrication technician. As a leader on the PDM team, he now focuses primarily on the lubrication program and its progress. Nate holds Machinery Lubrication Analysis Level 1 and Level 2, along with Machinery Lubrication Technician Level 1 and Level 2 certifications through the International Council of Machinery Lubrication. He is also certified in infrared thermography ultrasonic and ISO Cat 1 vibration. So Lisa and Nate, welcome to today's event, and with that, I'm going to pass things along to you all to get us started. So Lisa, go right ahead.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for integrating Industry 4.0 techniques into an on-site oil analysis program. I'm just going to quickly go over the agenda here, and then we'll jump right into it and get started. So today we're going to talk about the need for a new approach to oil analysis in the predictive maintenance industry and introduce the TruView 360 Enterprise Fluid Intelligence platform as a way to do that. So I will be starting out going over the cloud software in greater detail, talking about how the software works, and then we'll hear from one of our beta testers from a specialty alloys manufacturer that has been using TruView 360 since September of 2018, and he's been using it with our MiniLab 153 system. And then we'll wrap up with some questions and hopefully get you some good answers. And then we'll also talk about best practices for implementing TruView 360 on a global scale. So just a little bit of information about AMETEK Spectroscientific, who we are. We are the global leader of providing turnkey on-site oil analysis solutions for the predictive maintenance industry. We have a large customer base in over 100 countries in the oil and gas, mining, transportation, industrial manufacturing, power generation, and all branches in the military. Our headquarters are in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. We were founded in 1983, and we are ISO 9001 certified. Let's start out by looking at the broad-based demand for increased productivity in the Industry 4.0 era. Companies are increasingly focused on greater asset availability and database decision-making to drive enhanced returns. And there's a couple important factors that are influencing these decisions. So there's an increased focus on strategic asset management to maintain asset reliability and uptime. There's also an existing established reliance on condition monitoring techniques to enable predictive versus reactive maintenance that helps us avoid that costly downtime. We also understand there's limited availability of in-house technicians that is driving corporations to seek those third-party solutions. In the Industry 4.0 era, there's an increased reliance on rapid, comprehensive, and actionable data that helps us enable real-time decisions. With all of these factors being considered, there's growing capabilities of intuitive software that are helping us simplify and automate the process of a previous complex process of oil analysis. So utilizing and considering all of these different factors is really what led to the development of TruView 360. Before we can dive into how we can apply Industry 4.0 techniques to the idea of oil analysis, I want to take a look at what oil analysis actually is. So oil analysis can provide comprehensive and actionable information on the health of the actual component. There are three major components that we're looking at when we're doing oil analysis. We're looking at the overall machine condition. We want to understand the chemistry. We want to understand the contaminants that are possibly present in the fluid. We also want to understand, do we need to change the filter? Do we need to completely tear down the component? Is our oil clean? Is it dry? Is it even the right oil for the application? Ultimately, when we're making a decision about an oil analysis program and starting an oil analysis program, we ultimately want to reduce cost. We want to reduce inventory. We want to increase our asset availability, our reliability, and our return on our investment, prolong our equipment life. We also want to enhance our productivity. So by increasing our uptime, we're enhancing our productivity. So all of these different factors are extremely important to consider. Is how can we use the data that we're getting from our oil analysis program to make data-based, data-driven decisions? There are many options when it comes to using the idea of oil analysis in your corporation, and one of those options is using an offsite laboratory. There are a couple benefits with using an offsite laboratory. There are oil and tribology experts that are there specifically to promote oil analysis and that are writing your reports and there to consult with you on your reports. And they're also typically, these labs are using industry standard practices with a long history. They're using ASTM standards, and they have people that are there and they're running these ASTM standards on a daily basis. However, I want to consider some limitations to using an offsite laboratory. There typically can be a long cycle time when using an offsite lab, from days to even weeks. So the logistics take time and they're hard to improve. You can see there on the left-hand side, there's about a 12-step process from when we initially take the sample all the way to you getting your data back. This can take, like I just mentioned, days to possibly weeks to get that information back. By that point, it could be too late to integrate that data into your workflow. Even then, if you need something quickly turned around, you would pay for that. You would pay a premium price for that in order to get that data turned around quickly so that you could implement it into action. There's also a possibility of varying information. So you could have multiple people and handoffs throughout the process. You could possibly have wrong or missing oil and asset information. There could be a possibility of sample contamination. You just never know. There's also a lack of specifics and clarity in the recommendations. And that is because you have somebody that's not specifically there on site dealing with the equipment. Nate will get into this later about how he was specifically able to design the reports to be very specific to his different applications so that the people that he is reporting to know exactly what he's talking about and how to implement the actions that he is recommending. And then also, finally, there's a struggle for a lack of visibility within large corporations. Being able to justify an oil analysis program, being able to track those KPIs, having software that helps us document those wins, document the money, the time, the oil consumption saved, very important aspects of a lubrication program. Building an oil lab on site doesn't necessarily solve all of the issues. So there are some positives. There's a faster turnaround time by eliminating the shipping, but just by eliminating the shipping doesn't necessarily solve all of our issues. There's still the same limitations as an offsite lab. There still can be a complicated process with many people involved, a lack of training, a lack of intelligence, a lack of being able to track our KPIs. It can also be very costly to justify. It can be anywhere from $300,000 to $1 million to build a full tribology lab. We can also potentially have a problem with staffing. So we need receivers, chemists, tribologists, environmental officers, lab managers, those sorts of things. We still have a waste problem as well. We're going to have to be able to have a hazardous materials program, a waste disposal program. So simply building an on-site lab doesn't address all of the issues that we need to in order to have a successful oil analysis program. So all of these things really add up to the need for coming up with a simple and holistic approach to oil analysis. We want to simplify the process. We want to simplify how we gather the information, and we want to simplify the intelligence, the application portion of it. So we want to simplify the oil collection, oil testing, the maintenance actions. We want to simplify how we gather the information from the assets to the oil type to the diagnostics, and then finally our recommendations. And we want to simplify the intelligence. We want to simplify the feedback, the findings, the savings. We want to capture that, all of that information to have an overall holistic approach of how we're going to go about attacking an oil analysis program and creating an effective oil analysis program. So that leads us to TruView 360. So it's an enterprise fluid intelligence platform. This is really a new approach to how we organize our oil analysis program. So this is a tool that is to be used on site for the maintenance and reliability teams within corporations. It has two components to it. So the TruView 360 Enterprise Cloud software is a web-based software platform, and then it connects with the Minilab testing system through the TruView 360 device console. I'm going to refer to that as the TDC from now on. So we have lab quality data without a traditional lab. And the information we get from it is very data rich. So we're looking from trending, and we all know that trending is an extremely important part of an oil analysis program. So looking at historical data on our assets, and then looking at diagnostics, recommendations, and maintenance actions, and capturing those potential savings so we can justify our oil analysis programs. All of this is captured on a performance dashboard. You can see that on the right-hand side. And it's easy to use. So we have 5 to 15 minutes per sample, and we have a rules engine for automatic diagnostics. And Nate is going to get into that later when he talks about how he used the adaptive rules engine to specifically apply the rule sets to his particular equipment on site. So the Fluid Intelligence platform has a 5-step process where we're able to schedule, test, diagnose, and provide feedback, and then finally archive the data. So when we schedule the sample, we have that sitting in the queue, and when we're testing, we're going to use our TruView device console, the TDC, along with the Minilab series, and in this case, it's going to be the Minilab 153 series, to gather our data. And then we're going to push that back up to the cloud and apply our diagnostics and apply our recommendations, and then finally archive that data. So we really get a wealth of information from the enterprise cloud software where we're able to organize our assets, schedule, see the test results, observe the test results, apply actions and findings, and then trend and save the information. TruView 360 Enterprise Cloud software has several different licensing options. It's a web browser-based user interface, and it can be installed on a local PC, central server, and hosted in the public cloud. There's a couple different licensing options, and I'm going to briefly go over those licensing options now, but I encourage you to talk directly with your sales representative as early on in the process as possible to share your visions of your oil analysis program so the right licensing options can be applied to your case. We have the enterprise user license that is able to access and manage multiple sites. When Nate gets into his examples later on in his stories, he's going to be utilizing an enterprise user license where he's able to manage and access multiple sites. This also gives access to the corporate dashboard so those KPIs can be monitored and tracked. There are also site user license options where you have a site operator, a site administrator, and just a site reader where they have no access. In a site reader case, they would have no access to make any changes within the software, but simply be able to access the data and make decisions off of those data points. Let's take a look at the dashboard that you would see when you would typically log into the system. On the left-hand side, there's the asset tree and the toolbar for building and editing the asset tree. Very early on in the process, myself, along with members of the support team, we would work with you to build that asset tree to how you're envisioning it, or if you simply do not have a vision for how that asset tree should look, we would have those discussions as well. And also at the very top there, that is our navigation bar. Up there would be the user manuals that would be where you would assign privileges to different users within the site. There's also that dashboard in the middle where you have that nice snapshot of what's going on with your samples, and also be able to track total repair savings, total oil consumption, and different KPIs. And then at the bottom, you have your sample analysis process where we're able to go through that process of scheduling, untested, pre-diagnose, release, and then archive. TruView 360 gives us an easy-to-use tool to trend and look at our historical data. On the left-hand side is our asset tree. We're always able to have our asset tree there on the left-hand side showing us which point is highlighted and which data point which sampling point we are trending. At the very top, we know what our alarm limits are. We know what rule set that we're working off of. And then also at the very top there, we have our diagnostics and recommendations from the previous sample. So very important concept in oil analysis. We always want to understand, what does our previous sample look like, and how are we deviating from our previous sample? And that is what's going to drive us to make decisions and recommendations within the plan. And then we have the ability to create trending charts and look at that historical data. Based on the rule set and the alarm limits that we have set, that is what's dictating what is highlighted down there at the bottom, what is highlighted red, what is highlighted yellow. We'll get into the adaptive rules engine a little bit later, and Nate's going to get into how he specifically used that. But this comes preset with factory limits, and we're going to have the ability to change those if they don't necessarily fit for what we're working on. But right now, that's highlighted based on the alarm limits that we have set. The iron and the chrome, it looks like, are both a concern in this particular case. Let's circle back to scheduling samples and sample collection. If you are not familiar with how to take a good representative oil sample, I encourage you to get some training on how to go about doing that. Getting a good sample is the most important part to an oil analysis program. If you can't trust the sample that you're getting, you can't trust the data that you're analyzing. Therefore, you aren't making good decisions off of that data. So we want to encourage good sampling practices. And again, if you need some help getting training on how to get a good sample, please let me know. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. The TrueView system supports different ways to create new samples. So we can schedule to collect samples that will give us reminders to go out into the plant and collect those samples. We can schedule impromptu samples. So say somebody brings a sample into the laboratory and says, hey, I really need to know within the next couple hours what is going on here. Can you please create a barcode for this and run this through the mini lab so that I can get some data? Has the ability to create those impromptu samples. And then lastly, there's a route-based feature that allows us to group our samples based on however you would like. And in Nate's particular case, he's going to go into some more detail on how he used this particular feature to really help him organize how he took his samples. And then finally, there's a bottle labeling feature where we can print our labels and put those on the bottles prior to going out into the field to just really enhance that organization process. Once we've had the opportunity to go out into the plant, take our sample, we have it back in the laboratory in the plant, and we're ready to use the TrueView 360 device console to gather our data from our mini lab. So the TDC, it runs off of a desktop or laptop computer, and it interfaces directly with the mini lab system. And it collects the untested sample from the sample list, and then it gathers results from the mini lab hardware, and then it uploads those results to the TrueView 360 enterprise system, where the rules and the alarm limits are then applied to that data. So on the right-hand side there, we just have a screenshot of logging into the TDC system. So this is installed on a local PC with connections to the mini lab instruments via USB. So there's two modes how you can run it. You can run it in online mode, which is connected to TrueView 360 via the web service and internet, or on offline mode. So standalone, not connected to TrueView 360 Enterprise Cloud software. So in online mode, we use the same username and password as the TrueView Enterprise Cloud software, and we get access to the untested sample list from the authorized site. So that's very important. And then it also gives us the ability to interact with the rules engine. Once we log into the TDC, this is the screen we see and how we interface with the mini lab system. It's very simple to use. On the left-hand side, we have the instrument control, which for this particular case includes elemental analysis, viscosity, infrared, and particle analysis. At the very top left, we see the different test slates that we're able to run. In this particular case, it's the engine test slate. The purple bars that are showing up on the sides are showing which tests are included in the engine test slate. So in this particular case, elemental, viscosity, and infrared are being run. Then next to the engine test drop-down list, we have our list of our samples. Those samples are connected to the TrueView 360 Enterprise Cloud software. They are found under the untested tab. So that's how we populate that drop-down list. At the very top, we see a mapping of how where this point falls on our asset tree. And then as we go farther right, we have the tri-vector chart from the TruView 360 Enterprise Cloud Rules Engine. That gets highlighted once we upload that data to TruView. We'll see how that gets highlighted and how the rules get applied. And then in the very middle there, we have the raw results from the instrument. So once we gather all of our data from our instruments and that gets populated, we'll see as that data comes in, so the user can get a general idea of what kind of data is coming in prior to uploading it to the cloud. At the very bottom there, any notes can be added specifically for that sample, any observations that are being seen, so that even if the person who is possibly running the TDC and gathering the data isn't necessarily the analyst who's going to take this report to the very end and put it into action, that person has the opportunity to add some notes at the bottom of observations they might see about the sample so that the analyst can take that into consideration when creating the final report. One of the very useful features within the TDC is this best practice guide that is built in. It's a feature that can be turned on and off depending on who is using the instrument, how new they are to the organization, how new they are to using the mini lab. But it's a very useful feature to really just go over best practices and ensure that the instrumentations are being used correctly. So they're built-in guides to help the users follow the best practices for each of the test slates that are built in, from the engine testing to the rotating machinery tests to grease testing, and then reference oil testing, and takes you through that very easily and simply. There's built-in timers for time-sensitive procedures and really gives a great tool to reference and turn on and off depending on who is using the instrumentation. So here's the tri-vector report that finally comes out at the very end. There's a lot of freedom in being able to how to create this report. So the tri-vector is on every single report, and on the top right-hand corner we have the diagnosis of red, green, or yellow. And the user, and Nate will get into this in a lot more detail of how this applied to him, but the user has the freedom to change the alarm limits in the adaptive rules engine and also change the observations, diagnostics, and then recommended actions. He also has the option of adding additional recommendations. So being able to really customize this report to exactly his needs was a huge benefit from using the TrueView software. So let's talk a little bit more about the rules engine and what is the rules engine. So the adaptive rules engine, it's a two-step process that really does ensure high quality reporting. So there's automatic diagnostics and recommendations that are built in the software as is when it's initially purchased. But there's a lot of freedom in how these diagnostics and recommendations are used. So the user has a manual edit feature and review before the report is released. So that's very important in being able to customize each one of these reports to exactly what is needed. So there's an open architecture that we do call this the adaptive rules engine. The alarm limits, the diagnostic statements, and the recommended actions can all be changed based on the location, what environment, based on exactly what the engineer on site is seeing. So from recommendations to actions. So if you've had any experience with running an oil analysis program in the past on site, being able to capture your victories is a huge component of an oil analysis program. How much money have you been able to save? How many wins have you had? So this is a big gap in existing oil analysis programs. And what we've really tried to do with the TrueView 360 software is enhance the maintenance notes feature so that the on-site engineer has the ability to go back and put in recommendations, put in maintenance notes, put in wins basically of how the data has helped save money, helped save time, and what actions were taken. So this is a very good tool to use to justify an oil analysis program. And this is a very good tool to be able to use to capture those wins so that when corporate is asking the benefits of an oil analysis program, this is their one-stop shop to be able to capture all of that feedback and essentially justify the program. So getting started. So when TrueView 360 is initially purchased, it's going to have 23 different component sets that are worked in. So you have factory libraries of components, reference oils, alarm limits. The user would be working with myself and the support team to get the components properly set up, to get assets moved over from other software if that's the case. But the startup services includes setup of users, permissions, email notifications. Those would be discussions that the on-site user would have with myself or with the support team to really make sure that this program is designed exactly how they want it, and then set up the site asset structure. Although that's a lot of work at the beginning to set up an asset structure, really thinking through that process of how you want your assets set up is a huge exercise, but hugely beneficial if all of that work is done on the front end and really helps with organization. And then assigning oils to components, assigning alarm limits to components and sampling points, and then building an oil sampling schedule, understanding when to sample what components, understanding criticality of components, those sorts of things. And those would be discussions that we would have initially to make sure that the oil analysis program is exactly designed how you vision it. So what are some challenges to standardizing oil analysis practices on a global scale? So we know that it's difficult to standardize workflow globally. There can be large variations in process time and local practices that can make it extremely difficult to standardize workflow globally. This can be addressed with the TrueView 360 software platform. We know that it can be difficult to leverage learning globally. So there can be fragmented data from many different sources, differences in local laboratory expertise that really inhibit us from making the most out of our oil analysis programs. And then there can be little visibility of global program success. Lack of KPIs or dashboards on a global basis can make it difficult for us to justify our oil analysis programs on a global scale. So all of this stuff can be overcome using the TrueView 360 enterprise software. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Nate Hivner, and Nate has been a beta test user for us of the TrueView 360 software, and he has some great stories of how he used the adaptive rules engine, how he used the routes feature to organize his asset tree and organize how he took his samples. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Nate.
So hi, I'm Nate Hivner. I work with a predictive maintenance group at a specialty alloys manufacturer on the East Coast. In September of 2018, I was given the opportunity to be a beta tester for the TrueView 360 platform. And I'm just going to share some of my experiences with you. For those of you currently using OilView, you know there's a fairly steep learning curve that came with that legacy software. Not that it was bad software, you know, it was great to work with. But as I've heard it said before, you don't really change something by fighting the existing model. To really change something, you create a new model that renders the old one obsolete. And in my opinion, that's what SpectraSci's done here with the TrueView 360. It's far more intuitive, has a softer learning curve, and it's truly customizable. So you can tailor it to exactly what you need out of your oil program without spending hours on the phone with your third-party lab to get things straightened out as far as limit sets and things like that, or Emerson Tech support. I already discussed the conversions from OilView to TrueView, and one of the big benefits that I see in the future when I really get rolling with the TrueView platform in my plant is the ease of assigning baselines. I know that those of you that are working with third-party labs, keeping specific baselines assigned to a piece of equipment, you know, say a different batch comes in and, you know, that viscosity has swung, you know, a little bit in between the baseline and its current standings, you know, getting that baseline, it turns into a bit of a headache. And now that it's all on site, it's as easy as, you know, running another sample in there and calling it baseline. And now it's right in line, and your data should track fairly well from there. The tree structure in TrueView it fits my application really well. So we've got a fairly large corporation with several plants that eventually I'd like to bring on board. So being able to go from company to where I am at this specific site, and then within my specific site, there's several other maintenance areas, we call them, depending on the stage of production. So we'll have melting and finishing and processing and forging and shipping. Everybody's got a different responsibility and different environmental complications within those types of equipments. So we can really kind of dial it down. And each of those areas, needless to say, have different sets of management. So there's going to be a manager and an M tech and a lube tech and a whole series of different sets of people that need the data, and TrueView sends it right to them as soon as you release and notify, which is probably my favorite component of TrueView so far, is the ease of communications.
So Nate, when we were working initially with your asset tree and building this asset structure, you and I worked pretty closely together to make sure that this asset structure was exactly how you visioned it. And then also, we also worked together to assign component types to make sure that the right rule sets were assigned to each one of your pieces of equipment.
Yeah, so where I really wanted to get to with that was in a traditional oil lab, each component or sample ID, as they have it labeled, is just what it is. There's no way to group it together. When in reality, we're going to have, a piece of equipment that, say we have a forge, and the forge consists of 3 hydraulic units, a circulating lube system, and 10 gearboxes. Now we can all lump them all under an asset. So we have components with multiple sample points, and we can all put them under one asset and really dial down, using the dashboard, our bad actors, and find some good criticality sorting. And the other thing that TrueView is bringing to the table is the ability to plan routes. So my CMMS system that we're working with is currently really, really old. Like, it's a DOS system. So all it knows how to do is schedule a time. And being that way, a lot of our oil sampling currently is scheduled. So we'll have a certain department receive a certain work order for a certain PM at a certain interval. And at that interval, anywhere from 1 to 30 assets are sampled at a shot. And when it's just 1 or 2 samples, it's not that cumbersome to go into TrueView and create a sample and then send it off and get it done. But when you sit down and now you've got 70 some odd samples that you've got to create IDs for, create labels for, having this route management in there is awesome. So once that route is created, I've assigned, X sample point to all the components, and with just a couple of clicks, now I can schedule that whole route once I've created it, and print all the labels and hand it off to my lube techs and get them back without any confusion. So the route management function is really cool. I can't wait to really start working with it. So another big benefit of the TrueView 360 platform is this adaptive rules engine. It's a lot more intuitive than OilView. I know in OilView you can change monitoring parameters and limit sets and alarm sets, and you can do all those things. It's just cumbersome. The adaptive rules engine feature in the TrueView, it's drop down menus and type it. Whatever you want to say, you put it right in there, and it's it's really nice to work with. So one of the things that I've done with this so far is in our plant, there's a lot of ignition sources around, and so to mitigate fire risks, we use a polyol ester fluid in a lot of our hydraulic applications. That specific type of fluid was not created with a limit set yet in TrueView, so it was pretty much as easy as picking a rules engine that was close and then just altering it. So monitoring TAN has been a fairly successful method that we monitor this fluid, and so I had to change some of those parameters from the phosphate ester template to where I know they should be with my polyol ester fluid, and do the same with water limits, and then the ISO particle counts that were already in the rules engine were extremely stringent, so I separated them and created a low, medium, and high performance limit sets for monitoring hydraulic applications. And I'll get into how you can do that in the next slide a little bit. So I just discussed some of that, and you can see on the right-hand side of the adaptive rules engine is where you would put those maintenance actions in the abnormal and severe categories. And I think I actually just, yeah. So if you can read it, I made a specific comment to acquire a vacuum dehydration system for that unit in the event that the water ppm climbs beyond range. Yeah, and the limit types I think I touched on, but there it says absolute, so it's pretty self-descriptive. But there's several different functions under that limit type for deviance, for anything you really want to do with it. Really, say you've done some homework and in this specific area of my plant that titanium is an environmental contaminant. So anytime I see any amount of titanium coming up in my elemental spectroscopy, that I know to go and go after failed seals or failed breathers or anything like that. So I mentioned that we do have several other plants that I would really like to bring into the group, and that would be pretty easy. I've reached out to some of them yet, and we're discussing on how we can make it work, on whether they would send me samples or whether they would also purchase a mini lab, and then we'd all communicate together. But being able to leverage industry-specific types of finds and wins, within just our company, it's going to be really cool.
Thanks so much, Nate. That's great stuff. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your experiences with us, and also really thank you for being a beta customer. You've provided a lot of valuable feedback for us, and we certainly do appreciate it. So Nate touched on a couple very important aspects of the TrueView system, and he was pivotal in helping us develop the route feature for organizing samples. He's also really dove into the adaptive rules engine feature and made it his own. And that's the beauty of this system of being able to tap into the human intellect that's within the plant and work that into a software and capture that knowledge in a software platform to be able to standardize the workflow globally is really the true benefit of TrueView. One of the benefits of implementing an on-site oil analysis program with the TrueView 360 software is we end up uncovering needs we didn't even know we had. We're able to test more assets, test more frequently, and do special cases and be able to solve things on site in shorter amounts of time. And then having that freedom within TrueView to manage the alarm sets, manage the diagnostics and the recommendations, we're able to get a quicker turnaround on our process and really a quicker turnaround on how we can implement that data within the plant. We've seen multiple different cases throughout this webinar of how TrueView 360 can be leveraged on a global scale. It's an easy-to-use tool for reliability professionals providing lab quality data, and it's a simpler process that delivers the high-quality data and information. It also is a nice software package that allows us to capture all of that data and actions and recommendations in a single software system that can then be implemented globally. It provides a closed-loop feedback system where we're able to justify our programs. And then it provides that enterprise dashboard that brings visibility of oil analysis globally. And it helps us increase our asset availability, reduce operating expenses, reduce our inventory, reduce our oil consumption, and ultimately enhance productivity and uptime of our equipment. I want to thank everybody for their attention today. And if you have any additional questions, we're going to take some questions right now for the next couple minutes. But if you have any additional questions, my contact information is on the very last slide. Please feel free to reach out to me, and we are happy to get you some more information on the TrueView system. But I want to thank you for your time and attention today, and I hope to speak with you soon.
Okay, Lisa, Nate, thanks so much for that great presentation. Okay, now it's on to those questions. Here's the first question. How do I upgrade from OilView to TrueView?
So that's a great question. So it's best to contact your local sales representative for pricing on the upgrade. However, I can describe the logistics behind migrating over from TrueView to TrueView from OilView. So initially, what we would do is we would work to get your assets transferred over into the correct asset tree structure. So Nate talked a lot about that. Him and I worked pretty closely together to get the asset tree structure designed the way he envisioned it. So this would include making sure the correct component types and the base oils are assigned to each component. So in a hosted solution scenario like Nate is using, this spreadsheet would get uploaded and be ready for you to start using upon installation of the software at your facility. So myself, along with members of our support team, would be heavily involved in this process to ensure that the asset tree structure is properly set up and that the correct component types are assigned.
And thanks very much for that answer. Here's another question that came in. Can I have different adaptive rules engine templates saved for different sites?
Yes, you absolutely can. So this is an important feature, especially if you are the central lab and managing different locations. So in a case where you have a central lab type of scenario, it's critical to be able to make changes based on environment, location, or age of the equipment. So in this particular case, an enterprise user license would be required. But if you have this kind of interest, make sure to let your sales representative know early on in the process so they can quote the proper licensing package.
And thanks again for that answer. Here's another question that came in. How were the diagnostics and recommendations developed?
That's a really great question. So the diagnostics and recommendations were developed in-house at AMETEK Spectro Scientific by a team of industry experts, which included tribologists, mechanical engineers, and chemists. The diagnostics and recommendations are designed to be guides to help you get started with your oil analysis program and take the guesswork out of the analysis. Like Nate talked about a lot, he customized a lot of his rules engines, and we understand that you're experts on your own equipment. So the adaptive rules engine is designed to give you freedom to change the diagnostics and recommendations as you see fit. At AMETEK Spectro Scientific, we are continually adding and refining the adaptive rules engine, and a new release is expected to come out within the next few months with additional components added.
Okay, and our next questioner asks, what are the licensing options?
There are enterprise, site user, and site reader options that provide various levels of accessibility and privileges. So, for example, an enterprise license would be needed if the company's intentions are to set up a central lab location and manage various locations, like in Nate's case. Again, make sure to have these discussions with your sales representative as early as possible in the process so the correct licensing options can be recommended. Within the next few months, we will be releasing additional features that allow for local installs.
Okay, Lisa, thank you very much for those answers. And Nate, it looks like these next few questions are for you. What was the biggest challenge you had to overcome switching from OilView to TrueView?
I know it sounds trivial, but the biggest challenge was learning not to right click. It's funny, but like a lot of the other softwares that I use, for ultrasound and for OilView, a lot of the functions were right click. TrueView's not like that. That's my biggest beef with TrueView, if that's even a beef. I mean, other than that, everything else is exponentially easier to do with TrueView.
Okay, and thanks, Nate, for that answer. Here's another question for you. What was the most beneficial thing about switching from OilView to TrueView?
I think I mentioned this earlier. My favorite thing about it is the communications part. From OilView, in order for me to effectively communicate oil analysis data results, I would have to export to a PDF, save that PDF, put that PDF into an email, and then make any comments I would want in that email and then send it off. Where in TrueView, I have the option to edit the diagnosis before I even distribute the report. So I can go into the report and make any comments or anything I'd want to say about that specific sample and put that in the report. And then as long as I have the email list structured so that everybody that has any stake in that sample and would want to see that report, I click release, notify, and everybody gets an email with the PDF. So that's probably, in my opinion, one of the most beneficial things about the TrueView platform.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, Lisa and Nate, we're going to wrap things up right there. We'd like to thank both of you for taking some time to be here with all of us today, and we'd like to say a special thank you to all of our audience members for being part of this webinar event. Take care and have yourselves a great day.